Hello and welcome to Speed Politics 101, your go-to channel for unpacking the world of politics, society, and everything in between. I'm Billy Agwanda, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the fascinating ideas that shape our societies, past, present, and future. If you're curious about how politics influences our everyday lives, hit the subscribe and notification button so you never miss an update. In the last video, we've seen how Machiavelli is challenging us to think critically about power, leadership, and morality in politics. But what happens when we take the conversation further, beyond the pursuit of power to the very foundation of society itself? In this video, we explore the Hobbesian thought through his masterpiece, the Leviathan. Does the fear of chaos and conflict shape our social contracts? And is absolute authority the price we must pay for peace and stability? Hobbes' seminal work, the Leviathan, is considered as significant as other writings by Plato, Aristotle, and Rousseau. Today, Hobbes is renowned for his early development of social contract theory, a method of justifying political principles by appealing to the hypothetical agreement of rational, free, and equal individuals. But before we can take a deeper analysis of Hobbes' political theory, it is imperative that we first understand what circumstances led him to think about the social contract. To do this, let us turn our minds to a time of deep uncertainty, turmoil, and chaos, when England was torn apart by civil war. A war that pitted neighbor against neighbor, parliament against king, and ushered in a period of political instability and violence that shook the very foundation of society. Picture Hobbes, a man not merely watching this upheaval but feeling its tremors reverberate through his very being. This was no ordinary war, rather, a battle that exposed the fragility of order and the terrifying prospect of life without governance. Hobbes witnessed firsthand the consequences of divided authority, of what happens when no single power can claim legitimacy. England was a fractured nation teetering on the brink of the abyss. And it was in this crucible of chaos that Hobbes began to ask himself, what must be done to save society from self-destruction? The English Civil War didn't just inspire Hobbes to write, it compelled him to rethink the very essence of human nature and the structures that hold us together. He saw a world where trust was shattered, where power was contested, and where life in the absence of order became solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. For Thomas Hobbes, the Civil War was an experiential warning, a vivid reminder of what happens when we fail to come together under shared authority. This experience birthed one of the most enduring ideas in political thought, the social contract, as a model of how we might live not in fear, but in stability. Hobbes sought to establish rational principles for building a civil polity that could withstand internal collapse. Having experienced the English Civil War, he concluded that even the harshest government is preferable to the miseries and horrible calamities of civil war. Since nearly any government is better than civil war, and in Hobbes's view, non-absolute governments are inherently unstable and prone to civil war, people should submit to absolute political authority and refrain from actions that could undermine such a regime, including questioning sovereign power or engaging in rebellion. Hobbes argues that people who are equal in vulnerability in the state of nature strongly desire self-preservation, and are motivated by limited benevolence, pride, and fear of death. As a result, their judgments are often self-serving. In this state, everyone has a right of nature to do whatever they believe necessary for survival. The unrestricted right of everyone to all things inevitably leads to competition, particularly over scarce resources such as fertile lands. Consequently, this competition fosters mutual fear, as individuals may anticipate that others, citing the right of nature, might invade them, prompting rational plans for preemptive attacks in self-defense. Furthermore, a minority of prideful or vainglorious individuals, driven by a desire to dominate, will provoke defensive actions from others. Disputes will also arise from differing religious beliefs, moral judgments, and disagreements over what constitutes genuine needs or deserved respect. Hobbes therefore envisions a state of nature where each individual not only determines their own needs and rights but also imposes their judgments on others, acting and enforcing these views as they see fit. In the absence of a common authority to mediate such disputes, the state of nature would therefore descend into a state of war, characterized by relentless conflict, a war of all against all. According to Hobbes, sovereignty can be established in two ways. Through sovereignty by institution, where individuals mutually agree to obey a common authority, or through sovereignty by acquisition, where obedience is promised in exchange for protection from a conqueror. Both forms are equally valid, driven by the same underlying motivation of fear, whether of one's peers or of an external threat. The social contract involves the renunciation or transfer of individual rights and the authorization of sovereign power. Therefore, and importantly for Hobbes' political philosophy, political legitimacy is not determined by how a government gains power but by its ability to protect those who consent to obey. This obligation ends when protection fails. While Hobbes acknowledged some pragmatic advantages of monarchy over other forms of government, his central argument was that effective governance, regardless of its form, requires absolute authority. Sovereign power must be neither divided nor limited, as the interconnected nature of key functions like legislation, enforcement, adjudication, taxation, war-making, and control over normative doctrine demands unified control. A loss of one power risks undermining the effectiveness of the others. For instance, laws without enforcement are insufficient to regulate conduct. Only a government that holds all the essential rights of sovereignty can ensure stability, as dividing these rights among separate bodies with conflicting judgments risks paralysis or even civil war. Similarly, limiting government authority creates uncertainty and disputes about whether the government has overstepped its limits. If individuals are left to decide whether to obey, disagreements can lead to conflict or a breakdown of governance. Referring disputes to another limited authority only repeats the problem, while referring them to an unlimited authority simply shifts where absolute power lies. To avoid chaos and prevent a return to the state of nature, Hobbes therefore argued that the sovereign must have unquestioned, absolute authority. When subjects establish a sovereign authority through their consent, they agree not to hold it accountable for errors in judgment or treat any harm it causes as unjust, adhering to the principle that no wrong is done to a consenting party. Contrary to interpretations suggesting that authorizing a sovereign makes subjects morally responsible for its actions, Hobbes asserts that actions performed under sovereign command are solely attributable to the sovereign. This distinction reassures subjects, particularly Christian readers, that obeying even potentially sinful commands does not endanger their moral or divine accountability. Hobbes argues that actions compelled by laws are those of the sovereign, not the subject, as the subject acts merely as an instrument of sovereign authority. While Hobbes advocates absolute sovereignty, he acknowledges exceptions where subjects retain the right to disobey. He argues that the right to self-defense remains inalienable, allowing resistance when one's life, family, or honor is at stake. These true liberties of subjects raise questions about the compatibility of such rights with absolute sovereignty. Additionally, if subjects may judge whether the sovereign provides adequate protection, this judgment could lead to a reversion to the state of nature's uncertainties. These tensions in Hobbes's theory have sparked debate since his time, with critics continuing to scrutiny whether these limits on political obligation undermine Hobbes's defense of absolute authority, keeping his ideas a focal point of political philosophy discourse.